Have you ever thought about this? In this life, there are companies so big, banks so powerful, but that people call them too big to fail. That's what they say. They cannot fall. Never, ever. They're too massive, unimaginable in size, trillions of dollars flowing through them every single day. But then one day, it happens. They collapse, they fall. Rome fell. Who would have ever said Rome would fall? An empire that ruled half the world, lasted 1,000 years, gone. The Ottomans fell. 600 years across 3 continents, gone. The point is, every massive thing can fall. Every empire has an ending. Everything has a lifespan. Now, I'm going to tell you a story, the story of a company that survived for 158 years. It survived the American Civil War. It survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, the 1987 stock market crash, the dot-com bubble, even 9/11. And then, one Monday morning, it was over. The company's name was Lehman Brothers. And the day it died, the global economy lost $10 trillion in market value. 10 trillion. Because of one company. Because of one man. Listen carefully, because this story is going to teach you that everything you own, everything can disappear one day. The story starts in 1850. 3 German Jewish brothers, Henry, Emanuel, and Mayer, from Bavaria, from a tiny village called Rimpar. No money, no opportunity, no future. Henry goes first, 1844, to America, alone, 21 years old. He has one bag and one dream. He settles in Alabama in a small town called Montgomery. He opens a tiny dry goods store. He calls it H. Lehman. 3 years later, his brother Emanuel arrives. The sign changes. H. Lehman and brother. Then the third brother Mayer comes in 1850, and they put up a new sign, Lehman Brothers. Yes, they were really brothers. 3 actual brothers. 3 Jewish immigrants from Bavaria. They start as grocers. But these were smart kids. What was the most valuable thing in Alabama at that time? Cotton. The farmers were paying for goods with cotton bales instead of money. So Lehman Brothers said, we'll take that cotton. We'll ship it to New York. We'll sell it. And just like that, they entered the cotton brokerage business. Then came the Civil War, 1861. Henry was already dead by then. Yellow fever. Emanuel and Mayer were left. After the war ended, they moved the business to New York. And there, they founded the New York Cotton Exchange. They did. These brothers, these immigrants from Bavaria, they built the first commodities futures exchange in America, and then everything changed. They went from cotton to coffee, from coffee to petroleum, from petroleum to railroads. They financed America's railroads. They took companies public. They became an investment bank. By 1887, they were on the New York Stock Exchange. 100 years pass. Then in 1994, a new CEO takes over. This man matters. Remember him. His name was Richard Fuld. But Wall Street had another name for him. They called him the Gorilla. Why? Because he once got so angry in the office, he tore his own shirt off. He had his own private elevator. Nobody else was allowed to use it. The employees even had a nickname for his floor, Club 31, like the Emperor's private club. When Fuld took over Lehman in 1994, the company was losing money, $100 million in losses the year before, and Fuld lifted it. From 1994 to 2007, every single year, Lehman made a profit. In 2007, they reported $4.2 billion in profit. They became the 4th largest investment bank in America. 25,000 employees worldwide. They were managing $639 billion in assets. $639 billion. Just sit with that number for a second. $639 billion. That's more than the entire annual GDP of Sweden, more than Belgium. One company, one building in Manhattan. And right there is where the problem starts, because most of that money wasn't theirs. Leverage. Lehman Brothers had $30 of debt for every single dollar of their own equity. Imagine you have $100 in your pocket. You borrow $3,000, you invest it. If it works, you get rich. If it goes wrong even once, you lose everything and owe $2,900 on top. That's exactly what Lehman was doing, but with billions. So what were they investing all this borrowed money in? Housing, the American housing market, something called subprime mortgages, home loans given to people with bad credit. There was actually a product called a ninja loan. No income, no job, no assets. You have nothing. But here, take this loan, buy a house. In 2007, Lehman held more mortgage-backed securities than any other firm on the planet. Now you're going to hear the most shocking detail. March 2008. Lehman hasn't collapsed yet. Dick Fuld picks up the phone. He calls Warren Buffett. Warren, invest $2 billion in me. Save me. Buffett looks at the paperwork and says the real estate investments are too risky. But Buffett makes him an offer anyway. I'll invest $4 billion. Fuld turns it down. He says no, because Fuld believes in himself. He thinks the government will never let me fail. I'm too big. Too big to fail? Warren Buffett made one of the biggest decisions of his life in 2008. He turned down Lehman. He invested in Goldman Sachs instead. He made billions during the crisis. Why? Because Buffett listens to his discipline. Fuld was listening to his ego. Both rich, both intelligent, but one won and the other lost everything. Why? Discipline. March 2008. Bear Stearns collapses. JP Morgan buys them with government support. Wall Street is in panic. Everyone is looking at Lehman. What does Lehman do? They say, we've reduced our leverage, we're safer now. Except they were lying, because Lehman had a little accounting trick. It was called Repo 105. In the last few days of each quarter, Lehman would sell some assets temporarily, record it as a sale instead of a loan, and make their leverage look lower than it actually was. In simple words, they were lying. To regulators, to investors, systematically, for years. September 2008. Lehman stock dropped 77% in 1 week. Fuld panics. He calls Bank of America. Buy us. They say no. He calls Barclays. The British government vetoes the deal. Sunday night, September 14th, 2008. The Lehman board meets. Monday morning, September 15th, 2008. Lehman Brothers files for bankruptcy with $639 billion in assets, with $619 billion in debt, the largest bankruptcy in American history. The record still stands. That morning, 25,000 Lehman employees around the world arrived at work, and the doors were locked. Their computers wouldn't turn on. Their email accounts had been deleted. People who'd spent decades at the company were carrying boxes out of a building that had been worth billions just the day before. And then, what happened? The world collapsed. Stock markets crashed. Bank lending froze. The global economy lost $10 trillion in market value. $10 trillion? Barclays came in and bought Lehman's North American operations for $1.5 billion for a 158-year-old bank. The stock? Zero. Gone into history. And Dick Fuld? He's still alive today. He has a mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. He was never arrested. He never went to prison. He just lost some of his wealth. So the company died, the owners lived. Now I want to ask you something. What do you learn from Lehman? First lesson, there's no such thing as too big to fail. Nothing is too big. Rome fell, the Ottoman Empire fell, a 158-year-old bank fell. Every massive thing has a lifespan. Second lesson, arrogance destroys, discipline saves. The only difference between Warren Buffett and Dick Fuld was this. One man said, I could be wrong. The other said, I'm never wrong. One is among the richest people in the world. The other sits alone in a Connecticut mansion. Third lesson, debt is poison. Lehman had $30 of debt for every $1 of equity. It only took one wrong move for everything to end. If you're spending more than you earn, one day that mountain of debt will collapse on you. Fourth lesson, crisis punishes everyone, but it destroys the undisciplined. Goldman Sachs survived, Morgan Stanley survived, because they had prepared before the crisis. Lehman didn't prepare, because Lehman's CEO kept saying, we can't fail. Fifth lesson, and the most important one, it's not about having money, it's about managing money. Lehman was managing $639 billion. They disappeared overnight. You might be managing $10,000, but if you manage it with discipline, in 10 years you could be stronger than Lehman ever was. Think about this. Rome lasted 1,000 years. The Ottomans, 600. Lehman, 158. What matters is how we play the game. What matters is knowing when to stop. If this story hits you, subscribe right now. Because next week, I'm telling you the story of a German billionaire who walked up a Swiss mountain with $10 billion and never came back down. No body, no trace. And wait until you hear who he was on the phone with 3 days before he disappeared. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments, which great collapse do you want me to cover next? I'm billion to zero. Every empire falls. The only question is, when's your turn?